Good morning, folks. Welcome to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Shroyer, your host, and today we're going to be talking to Dallas Peterson, our extension weed specialist at Kansas State University, because now's the time of the year that we need to be controlling those weeds in our wheat crop. So stay with us. We'll be right back, and we'll be talking to Dr. Peterson in just a moment.
Closed captioning brought to you by Kansas Soybean Commission. The Soybean Checkoff Progress, powered by Kansas farmers.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Good morning, folks. Welcome to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Shroyer, your host, and today we're in luck because we're speaking to Dallas Peterson. He is a weed scientist here in the agronomy department at K-State. And Dallas, it's wintertime. We've got snow outside, but it's supposed to be 60 or 70 tomorrow. And I know there's a lot of weeds out there in the wheat field. So kind of go through with us our weeds that we need to be watching for in our wheat right now.
Well, we have a variety of weeds that we can have in our wheat fields, and with probably the most abundant ones that we have in winter wheat are the winter annual weeds because they have a similar life cycle, and there can be winter annual broadleaf weeds as well as winter annual grasses. And we also can have some summer annual weeds, although they won't be germinating and come up until this spring. So right now the ones that are out there that we need to be cognizant are the winter annual broadleaf and grass weeds.
Okay, what are some of those? Let's go to the eastern third of the state. What are the main ones?
Well, probably the most abundant ones are the broadleaves. And in eastern Kansas, things like henbit, bushy wallflower, or treacle mustard, field pennycress, those would be some of the primary ones that we have. But we can also have a few other winter annual broadleaf weeds, especially the mustards, things like flickweed or tansy mustard.
Right, okay. We don't worry too much about the grasses, annual grasses in this part of the state?
Well, in eastern Kansas, they're not a major problem because we have enough crop rotation. Crop rotation is probably our best management practices to deal with the winter annual grasses. Although we could have them, especially as we move a little bit more toward the central part of the state and we do a little bit more continuous
segue into the central part of the state. What are the weeds there?
Well, really similar, although we probably don't have as much of the henbit, for example.
Right.
The mustards are probably our predominant broadleaf weed there. Bushy wallflower, treacle mustard, flickweed, tansy mustard, maybe even some blue mustard. Those would be our primary broadleaf weeds that we would have to deal with there.
Grasses?
And the grasses definitely then become much more prominent through central Kansas because we do a little bit more continuous wheat cropping. So downy brome, cheat, Japanese brome, maybe even a little cereal rye in a lot of places. Right. And then you get down onto the southern border, perhaps even a little bit of Italian ryegrass.
Right. Now, will Italian ryegrass be in the southeast part too, as well?
Right along the Oklahoma border, both in southeast and south central, and maybe even a little bit into southwest, but primarily in that south central and southeastern part. Okay,
real quickly, what about the weeds in the western part of the state?
Well, weeds in the west would again be the mustards primarily, flickweed and tansy mustard. Also, from the grass standpoint, downy brome is probably the predominant grass that we have there, as well as jointed goat grass, which is another winter annual that can be very problematic.
Little blue mustard out there too, right?
There is some blue mustard as well.
Don't go away, Dallas. We have to take a break right now. Folks, stay with us. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
This hog is Hanover hoof for meal made from U.S. soybeans. Now, one hog isn't that impressive, but suppose we add another, and another, and another. Before long, you've got billions of hungry customers around the world all clamoring for the same thing. Our soybeans. Learn more about the billion-dollar appetite of animal agriculture at BeyondTheElevator.com. Brought to you by America's soybean farmers and their checkoff.
Kansas Farm Bureau, the voice of agriculture, represents grassroots agriculture. The state's largest and most powerful farm organization stands up for its members through leadership development, agriculture education, legal defense, environmental advocacy, farm safety, and risk management. Members also enjoy money-saving benefits. To join our organization today or to learn more, go to www.kfb.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Soil is the life of a farm, and for 25 years, SureCrop Liquid Crop Nutrition has helped growers produce abundant quality crops while preserving and improving the soils they steward. SureCrop offers complete soil and plant analysis with cropping recommendations, delivery direct to your on-farm storage, and quality crop nutrition custom blended for your field. Choose SureCrop for the assurance of excellence for your soil. Call today or visit their website for more information.
Tallgrass Commodities offers producers bulk commodities at a reasonable price with reliable service throughout the whole Midwest. To find out more about Tallgrass Commodities, visit tallgrass.us or call 785-494-8484. That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities, big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Shroyer, and with us we have Dr. Dallas Peterson, Extension Weed Scientist here at K-State. And we've just talked about the weeds that are in the various parts of the state. Now let's kill them, Dallas. So let's go through the broadleaves first. What are some of our herbicide options that we can use?
Well, we have a lot more options to control broadleaf weeds probably than we do grass weeds. And to be honest with you, a lot of the broadleaves can be controlled fairly well and fairly economically. But there are a number of herbicides. We could start with our growth regulator type herbicides, things such as MCPA, 2,4-D, and dicamba. Timing is a little bit critical with those herbicides. Most of them will provide pretty good broadleaf weed control in general, although there are specific broadleaves that they don't control. For example, dicamba is very good in the spring for things like kochia and wild buckwheat, but it's not very good for the mustard, so you would have to apply something else in combination with the dicamba for the mustards. MCPA and 2,4-D are both good in general for mustard control. They're not very good, for example, however, for kochia control in the spring. So we see that different spectrum of control from the different herbicides. MCPA is got a lot better safety than 2,4-D does.
Of course, that's one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, it is, and over the years we felt it probably has been an underutilized herbicide. In some cases it may not be quite as effective as 2,4-D on certain weeds, but again it has a broader window of application.
You can put it on in the fall, and 2,4-D you shouldn't. Exactly.
MCPA can go on in the fall before the wheat is fully tillered. With 2,4-D we never recommend it in the fall because it can inhibit that tillering process, and so we generally suggest that it not be sprayed until spring, and even in the spring you want to make sure your wheat is fully tillered before you make those 2,4-D
It stops tillering right there on the spot.
And it can result in yield losses.
Right. Okay, continue.
The sulfonylurea herbicides in general also can provide very good broad spectrum broadleaf weed control, and some of those have a long residual activity and others do not. Finesse, for example, and Glean herbicide have been kind of standard treatments through central Kansas for many years and have provided, in general, very good broadleaf weed control. They're good on the mustards, they're good on henbit, they're good on field pennycress, they're very good on wild buckwheat. One of the issues, however, with that class of herbicides has been the development of certain species with resistance to that class of herbicides.
We'll talk about that in just a minute. So okay, continue some of the other herbicides that you can use.
Yeah, there are other sulfonylurea herbicides as well, and again that list is fairly long, but things like Rave, which actually is a combination of amber herbicide and dicamba herbicide. So it's a mixture of two active ingredients, which is beneficial. You got
to be a little careful on that one because if it's jointed, it'll ding it.
Exactly right, and we talked about the timing with 2,4-D and MCPA, but that's also important with dicamba.
Yeah, it's a good herbicide.
It's a good herbicide. It's effective early, but you don't want to spray it after that wheat starts to join because it will lay it over.
Okay, I think we got to stop for a break here, Dallas, and keep those herbicides in mind. And folks, we'll be right back after these words. Thank you.
American innovation is being driven in places you might not expect by people like Brent Hayek, an Oklahoma family farmer, who recently set a world land speed record in a Ford Super Duty pickup truck powered by renewable B20 biodiesel. Advanced performance is here, now, putting America on the fast track to more jobs and energy independence. Biodiesel, America's advanced biofuel.
Tallgrass Commodities offers producers bulk commodities at a reasonable price with reliable service throughout the whole Midwest. To find out more about Tallgrass Commodities, visit tallgrass.us or call 785-494-8484.
Hello friends, I'm Ernie Rodina.
And I'm Dawn Dawson with the Better Horses Radio Show.
For over 9 years, we've been bringing the Better Horses Radio Show to markets all across the Midwest. We talk about God, lots about horses.
We talk about cows, we talk about horse health, we talk to top trainers, and we even talk about Roy Rogers.
We're having a blast with Better Horses Radio Show and would love to take it to a market near you.
So visit our website at betterhorsesradio.com and let us or your local radio station know you'd like to hear it in your area.
The Better Horses Radio Show is unbelievable.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Shroyer, and with us we have weed scientist Dallas Peterson. And let's continue the conversation about broadleaf herbicides.
Okay. Well, again, there are a number of different broadleaf herbicides available, and each has a little different spectrum of control and timing and safety and everything else, some different modes of action. One of the newer broadleaf herbicides that's been introduced in recent years is called Husky. And Husky is actually a pre-mix itself. It's a combination of a bleaching type herbicide, so that's a different mode of action that we've talked about, along with Buctrol, old Buctrol herbicide.
Yeah.
And that actually helps to synergize the bleaching herbicides. And so that's actually a good alternative, for example, if you have ALS resistant weeds, because it does provide a different mode of action. Has very good safety, both as a fall or a spring treatment. One thing is, though, it doesn't have a lot of residual activity. And so like most herbicides that don't have residual activity, you want to spray them when the weeds in the crop are actively growing. So they probably would not be a good candidate right now, but as soon as that weed starts to green up in the spring,
So we're
then
talking
that would be a good
March
shot.
type applications.
Certainly.
Okay. What are some other ones?
Well, again, in many cases, we might look at different combinations or alternatives, such as starine type herbicides.
Right.
Starine is a very good kosher herbicide.
So for out west mainly.
And the one advantage it might have over dicamba, which is another very good kosher herbicide, is that we can go on a little bit later in the season. Again, with dicamba, we don't want to be spraying after that weed starts to joint, but the starine products can go on a little later. You want to make sure you can still get good coverage, but it can provide very good kosher control.
Okay. We flirted with the issue of resistant weeds. Let's talk about resistant weeds. What are they? And now we're going to be talking about some more combinations.
Right. Well, herbicide resistance occurs over time, generally when we use a herbicide repeatedly. And again, we've gotten into a little bit of trouble with some of our herbicides, and most notably those ALS inhibiting herbicides that I was talking about.
Right.
Things like Finesse, for example. We
Yep.
use them a lot over the years, and consequently we did shift our population, and we now are starting to see some ALS resistant weeds. And the primary ones that we've seen to this point in time are the mustards like bushy wallflower and even flickweed or tansy mustard. The most recent one that we've actually found has been henbit. And so that's one of the reasons that it is a good idea to tank mix those herbicides with other modes of action and to rotate herbicides among different modes of action. So with Finesse, for example, we almost always recommend now that you tank mix it with an MCPA or a 2,4-D to get that second mode of action in that treatment.
You know, of course, crop rotation will help too, because now you got your herbicides for your row crops in there as well.
Well, absolutely. Crop rotation is one of our best management practices for weed management in general, including herbicide resistance, because it does break up that growing season and it allows us to use different herbicides with different modes of action.
Okay, Dallas, we need to take a break right now. And folks, now's the time to go get a cup of coffee, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
This is the fast track to more jobs and America's energy independence. Advanced performance is here, now. Biodiesel, America's advanced biofuel.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
Tallgrass Commodities offers producers bulk commodities at a reasonable price with reliable service throughout the whole Midwest. To find out more about Tallgrass Commodities, visit tallgrass.us or call 785-494-8484. Valley Vet Supply is devoted to providing information and professional quality products at reasonable prices.
Valley Vet Supply.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. With us we have weed scientist Dallas Peterson. And Dallas, you know, you've given us some good advice about the various weeds and the herbicides for broadleaves. Now let's kind of shift to grasses. Those are a little bit, I think they're a little bit trickier myself. So tell us about the grasses and the herbicides.
Well, certainly the grasses have been more of a problem over the years when we have them. Now, they're not quite as common because, again, if we were in a good rotation of crops with summer broadleaf crops or grass crops, generally we can keep those down. But where we tend to grow a lot of wheat, we tend to have some problems then with the winter annual grasses.
That central corridor, basically.
Central corridor, and because they have a very similar growth habit to the wheat, and it's harder to develop selective herbicides, it will take a grass out of a grass. But we have seen some herbicides introduced over the years that can selectively control grasses in wheat. And so again, we're primarily looking at downy brome, cheat, Japanese brome, perhaps jointed goat grass, and Italian ryegrass. So all the herbicides that have been developed to control grasses and wheat do belong to that ALS inhibiting class of herbicides. And so primarily at this point in time we have Olympus herbicide and PowerFlex herbicide. And then if you plant clearfield wheat, you also have the option of using Beyond herbicide. But you cannot use Beyond on any clearfield wheats. So with the grasses, again, they are harder to control in general than the broadleaves in many cases. And timing can come into play there. We generally get our best grass control actually with fall applications, okay? And so we're talking about a mid-November type of time frame when hopefully the wheat is starting to tiller, but those young grasses still have not started to tiller. And that's usually when we get our best performance. But we can also apply them in the spring. But the key there, again, is not to wait too long. You want to get those applications on as soon as that wheat and those weeds start to actively go and green up in the spring.
So we're talking about in late February, you know, if we get a good warm spell, which we've been having them all winter long, but into early March maybe? Yeah,
probably late February at the earliest. Again, we want things to actually start to take off, but you want to get them before we develop a lot of canopy, and that's going to give us our best results.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Beyond again.
Okay, well, Beyond actually has broader activity than Olympus and PowerFlex. Olympus and PowerFlex are pretty good on the cheat grasses, if you will, downy brome and cheat and Japanese brome, but they're not very good, for example, on jointed goat grass or cereal or feral rye. And really the only herbicide that will control those two grasses is Beyond. So again, Beyond has to be used in clearfield wheat only. The timing is very similar as far as performance is concerned. Fall applications generally work the best, but if we can get that application on early in the spring, just as it's starting to take off, we can get good control of those species as well. Usually Beyond does a better job on jointed goat grass than the rye. Rye has been a little bit inconsistent, and so we have to maybe be a little more aggressive with those treatments for rye control.
Okay, hang on here. Folks, we'll be right back after these words.
I'm Dr. Frank Lyons, a physician here at Kansas Regenerative Medicine Center. As one of the only standalone stem cell centers in the U.S., we use your stem cells as therapy for arthritis and some autoimmune diseases.
I'm Dr. Andrew Poe. Here at Kansas Regenerative Medicine Center, utilizing the latest technology under strict protocols, we're able to harvest your stem cells from your own fat to treat a variety of medical conditions. The best part about it is, it's a same-day surgical procedure and requires no general anesthesia.
Buying a car shouldn't be this hard. And at Brown Chevrolet Buick in Wamego, it isn't. It's actually awesome. Whether you want a new or used car or truck, Toby's team can make the deal. Even if you want to custom order a new car or truck, Toby's team can make the deal. See Toby's team at Brown Chevrolet Buick in Wamego. We're awesome. Tallgrass Commodities offers producers bulk commodities at a reasonable price with reliable service throughout the whole Midwest. To find out more about Tallgrass Commodities, visit tallgrass.us or call 785-494-8484.
When your living depends on agriculture, you can depend on KFRM 550 AM. If you're in the southwest three-fourths of Kansas or the northern half of Oklahoma, catch us at 550 AM on the radio dial. But if that isn't you, listen on your cell phone at TuneIn Radio or on your computer at KFRM.com. We promise to keep you informed, entertained, and company as you go through your day. KFRM 550 AM, the voice of the plains. We would like to join your management team.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Shroyer, and with us again we have Dallas Peterson in our last segment. Dallas, let's talk about carryover and applications with fertilizers.
Okay. Well, it has been very popular over the years to apply a lot of our herbicides along with nitrogen fertilizer carrier. The advantage there, of course, is that you eliminate a trip across the field.
Exactly.
But you have to make sure that the herbicide is compatible with the fertilizer, and you also want to think about the optimum timing of the two applications. They may or may not be compatible. So the long-lived residual sulfonylurea herbicides probably have worked best in that weed and feed type of operation. Again, things like Finesse and Glean and Amber and Rave, because they have soil activity as well as foliar activity, and they are compatible with the fertilizer. And from a timing standpoint, those actually work quite well if we apply them, for example, even in January and February and early March. As you get later, then you may want to back off of some of those combinations. And you also, it's very important that you read the label in regards to how to mix it and whether you need to add surfactant or not. And again, as you get later, sometimes the issue is adding surfactant along with that fertilizer can increase the risk of burn and injury to the weed. So just make sure you follow the label guidelines.
Okay, and also we talked about later on, you've got carryover issues for the next year. So talk a little bit about carryover issues.
Well, one of the advantages of those residual herbicides is that they do give us residual weed control, but of course that means they are also persisting in those fields, maybe even beyond the wheat harvest. And so again, that can be an advantage or disadvantage. It can help provide control even post-harvest. On the other hand, you just have to be aware of what crops may be susceptible that you would plant after that point in time. And so we're looking at those same herbicides as far as having some crop rotation restrictions. Finesse, Glean, Amber, Rave, as well as even a couple of those post-emergence grass herbicides, the Olympus, PowerFlex, and beyond also have some crop rotation restrictions. So just make sure you're aware of what those are and abide by those label guidelines.
Yeah, I know one of the issues when we have poor stands out there and weeds coming in, well, do you fertilize it? Do you put on a herbicide, and then if the crop fails, then what do you do?
It really is a dilemma because you hate to invest too much money in a poor crop, but yet if you've got thin wheat, you need to have a herbicide out there to give you good weed control as well.
And hopefully, if it fails, you can come in with beans or something like that.
And that's when you need to think about, what those rotational limitations are.
Okay, you've got the handbook there in your hand, and kind of tell us real briefly here about this little puppy.
Well, this is the chemical weed control guide, and we revise it each year to add the newest herbicides that have been introduced in the market and any label changes that have come about. It actually has guidelines on all of our major crops as well as in pasture and range land for noxious weed control and even non-crop land. So we think that it's a very useful guide for growers. It doesn't substitute for a label, but yet it should provide good information to help select those herbicides.
Dallas, I really appreciate you taking time, and thank you. I know you got to go to a meeting here in just a minute, so I appreciate it. And folks, thank you for being with us this morning, and don't forget, next Friday we'll be here at the same time.
Closed captioning brought to you by Kansas Soybean Commission. The Soybean Checkoff Progress, powered by Kansas farmers.